On this part, we're going to talk about how we can pass data from a view to a controller using form submission. But in this example, we are not going to use a model or a view model. We are just going to use property names, and then we are going to get the property name values on our action. So let's go to Visual Studio. In this part, as an example, we are going to use the login form. So I'll just go to the Solution Explorer. And then in here, I'll go to authentication and then login.c#html. And I'm going to search for the form where I have defined that I want to use the ASP controller authentication and ASP action login. And then down here, I have two inputs. The first one is the email address and the second one is the password. And then down here, I have a login button of type submit. And since by default, the forms have the method post, we don't need to specify up here that the method of this form is going to be a post. Now, to pass the values using a form submit from the form to the action, in the input field, you need to define a name. So here we have type. After the type, I'll just go to write name, and the name is going to be email address. Then down here for the input password, I'm going to have another name, and the value is going to be password. Now let us go to the controller. So I'll just go to Solution Explorer and then here Authentication Controller. And here we're going to create another action. So we want one action to return the view, just the view with no data. And we want the second one to handle the request that comes from that view. So in here, we have authentication login, but it's going to need two parameters, the email address and password. Just going to type in here, string email address, and then string password. And then I'm just going to return them to the user. So I'll just put a breakpoint in here just so I can check that I'm getting the values from the form. Let me save the changes, and then I'll just run this project. Now I'll go to the login form. We see that we have an error which says that the request matched multiple endpoints. And that is right because the string is by default optional, so it did match both endpoints. What we can do is that I can close the browser. I can just change in here from login to login submitted. And then I'll just go to the login.c#html and change in here the action to login submitted. Save the changes and run the project one more time. I'll just go to login one more time. And now you can see that it's rendered successfully. I'll just provide in here my email address. And then a password, 126, and I click the login button. You can see that we reached the breakpoint, and if I hover on the email address, you can see that I have the value Ervis Trupja at test.com, and the password is 126. Now, as you can see in here, the data is being passed successfully, but imagine you have to pass, let's say, 20 or 50 parameters. As you can imagine, the form is going to get really long. It's going to have like 20 or 50 parameters. So there must be a better way to handle the form submissions, and that is what we are going to talk about on the next part.